Good morning, everyone. My name is Councillor Rick Jones, and I'd like to welcome you all to this morning's Licensing Subcommittee meeting. I will explain how the meeting will be conducted in a moment. But before I do that, could I please ask the clerk to provide us with some guidance about how the meeting will be conducted and how to participate?
Good morning. Can all participants hear me? If you're joining remotely, please raise your virtual Zoom hand if you're able to do so. I will start with some reminders to members and other attendees about the way we conduct council meetings in the new hybrid format. This meeting is being held both over Zoom and with officers and councillors present in the council chamber, adopting COVID safety measures. I can confirm that those present in the chamber are sitting socially distanced and are thus permitted to remove their face masks while seated. We need to remind all persons attending the meeting in person that they must sign in on the meeting register and the NHS app via the NHS Test and Trace QR code. Wear a face covering when in the building unless you are seated in the meeting or have a face covering exemption. Observe the 2 metre social distancing where possible. Clean your desk and any supplied equipment like the microphone before and after the meeting using the cleaning materials supplied. Avoid physical contact such as handshakes. Avoid sharing pens, documents and other objects. Use hand sanitizer when entering and before leaving the meeting rooms and buildings and after touching any surface such as a door handle. Abide by any signage or seating plans to help maintain social distancing. Parties to the proceedings have been encouraged to attend remotely via Zoom. However, they can also choose to attend in person or remotely from within the Market Street building, for example, from reception or the Roger Croft room, or from any public device in any location. The meeting is fully accessible both physically and remotely for any member of the public. This meeting is being webcast and recorded. For those attending remotely via Zoom, the chairman will be checking at various points during the meeting that you have been able to hear all of the proceedings. We would ask that you confirm this by clicking the raise hand link at the bottom of your screen. We cannot proceed with the meeting until we assure participants attending remotely can be heard when permitted to speak and can hear. If at any point you are not able to hear, please could I ask that you let us know if you are able to, for example, using the chat function or raising your Zoom hand. If we become aware of any of these the parties attending remotely have not been able to hear, we will have to go back to that point in the meeting where they were able to, or it may be necessary to adjourn the meeting. If you are unable to hear the proceedings, it might be useful to join the meeting via telephone rather than the microphone on your device. Please notify us if you have been absent for any part of the meeting while phoning in. Those of you attending are currently muted. If you are attending remotely, please remember to unmute yourself when you are asked to speak by the chairman and then remute when you have finished speaking. The host may remute you if you forget to do so. You will be advised to unmute yourself if you start to speak and have forgotten to do so. We ask that microphones are muted when not speaking to minimize disruption from background noise and also to prevent any issues resulting from feedback. Those of you present in the council chamber can speak using the microphones. The chairman will set out the order in which people will be asked to speak. If, at the appropriate point, anyone attending remotely wishes to ask a question, please use the raise hand facility. This will give an indication against your name on the participants list. The chairman will then be notified that you wish to ask a question. The chairman will then invite you to ask your question in the order he deems most appropriate. Once you are speaking, please lower your Zoom hand. The host may cancel your Zoom hand if you forget to do so. If you are present in the council chamber and wish to ask a question, please raise your physical hand. Anyone that has phoned in, you won't be able to signal. So once other participants who have raised the Zoom hand have asked their questions, I will ask the chairman to invite anyone who has telephoned in to ask their questions in the order that he wishes them to do so. If we need to adjourn the meeting at any point, the chairman will adjourn and all parties will be advised of the revised time and date of the meeting. If it is a short adjournment, you will be able to rejoin this Zoom meeting Otherwise, a fresh appointment will be sent out. Does anyone have any questions about the way the meeting will be conducted?
I don't see any questions. Thank you very much, Gillian.
Sorry, I have raised my hand. Councillor Simon Pike. Just an information that Councillor John Boyd was hoping to join the meeting. He has unavoidable work commitments and may join late. If not, I have a statement that I'll read on his behalf at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I will be checking to the point, I think, where you'll get bored, that everyone can hear, but I'll do that throughout the meeting. So can I just check that everyone can hear what I'm saying and has heard Gillian's explanation?
Yeah, it's all perfect for me. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to confirm that the application we'll be hearing today is from Nigel Bryant for a review of an existing premise licence in relation to Pinchington Hall, Crookham Common, Thatcham, RG 198DQ. This application has been recorded under reference number 21/00786/LQN. I'm supported in this morning's subcommittee by councillors Billy Drummond, councillor Claire Rolls. They are present in the chamber. Councillor Tony Linden has had to withdraw because of a potential conflict of interest. The solicitor advising the subcommittee is Beth Varco on my right, and Gillian Steele on my left will maintain a record of the proceedings. We're also being assisted by Stephen Chard, who will be acting as the Zoom host of the meeting. Mr. Nigel Bryant, the applicant, is in attendance today via Zoom. In addition to Mr. Bryant, the applicant, I understand that an additional witness, Mr. Peters Thompson, is in attendance. In the chamber, I see. Okay. Councillor Simon Pike from Thatcham Town have supported the review. He is in attendance today, and we've had his apologies for Councillor John Boyd. Councillor Steve Ardar Water of West Berkshire Council is in attendance today via Zoom as ward member for Thatcham, Colthrop and Crookham. Ms Jodie Wilson and Mr Russell Davidson, representing Environmental Health, are in attendance today also via Zoom. Ms Linda Beattie Smith, the licence holder who has objected to the review, is in attendance today in person. In addition to Mrs Linda Beattie Smith, the licence holder, I understand that licence holder's representative, Joanna Moore, is in attendance. Thank you. And also in the chamber. The council officer's licensing officer, Brad Tim, is attending via Zoom. And he will introduce the application at the right time. I would just like to reiterate that I'll be asking all parties attending remotely if they've been able to hear the discussion at the conclusion of each presentation and at the end of each question and answer session. If at any point in the meeting you have not been able to hear the whole discussion, could I please ask you to raise your Zoom hand or let me know verbally if you are able to do so. We will then repeat that part of the meeting, as it's very important that everyone can hear everything. Can I just check at this point, is everyone still hearing the remarks?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so next on the agenda, can I ask members if they have any interest that they wish to declare? No?
No, Chairman.
None to declare. Okay. I'll now go on to explain how these meetings are conducted. Each individual or group of individuals or representative of a group will have a maximum of 10 minutes between them if there's more than one person to speak. After each contribution, there can be questions from the subcommittee members and then from each group in turn at my invitation. Questions may be asked through me as chairman and must be relevant to the application or the council's licensing policy, or for the purpose of clarifying a statement that has been made. To facilitate that, please raise your Zoom hand, or if in the chamber, your physical hand, if you have a question you wish to put, and wait for me to call upon you. The order of contributions will be as follows. First, I invite the licensing officer, Brad Tim, to introduce the application. Next, I'll invite the applicant, Mr. Nigel Bryant, via Zoom to make his points. And then Mr. Linda Beattie-Smith and Joanna Moore are to speak in objection to the application. Next, supporters of the review, Councillor Simon Pike, will have the time to speak. And next, as a responsible authority, I will ask Ms. Jodie Wilson and Mr. Russell Davidson, as representatives of environmental health, to speak. Next, the ward member, Steve Ardar-Water, will have a chance to speak. The applicant would then have a right to address the comments made at the subcommittee. I am proposing to suspend a procedure rule in accordance with Rule 7.7.1 of our Constitution and propose that the licence holder is also given an opportunity to address the comments made and to do so after the applicant at the end of the meeting. I would like to propose that to members now. Thank you. Are we all in favour?
Yes, Chairman.
Okay, in that case, that rule will be suspended and the licence holder will have the chance to speak at the end. Remember, each individual or group has 10 minutes in which to make their case, and this should take into account the Licensing Act's 4 objectives. Firstly, the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm. And any decisions that we will make will obviously be in relation to those objectives. Gillian Steele will be timing the 10 minutes, and I will notify you when you have a minute left. Once all representations have been made and all questions asked, I will close the meeting. After this, the members of the panel will meet privately to make a decision, and a written decision notice will be issued to interested parties, setting out the verdict as soon as possible, but in any event within 5 working days of this hearing. I would like to take this opportunity to remind all parties present that this is a public meeting and the meeting will be webcast on YouTube. It is therefore necessary to remind parties that they are in a public forum and ask participants to bear this in mind in terms of anything said during the hearing. Again, can I check that everyone has heard those introductory comments?
Yes, thank you.
Could I therefore ask Brad Tim initially to introduce himself and to introduce the application? Brad, you're on mute at the moment.
Apologies, Chair. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Brad Tim. I'm a licensing officer with the Public Protection Partnership for West Berkshire Council. Just to give you a brief overview, West Berkshire Council accepted an application on the 17th of September 2021 for the review of a premises licence under Section 51 of the Licensing Act 2003 for the premises at Pinchington Hall, Crookham Hill, Crookham Common, Thatcham, RG 198DQ. So the grounds for review are all of the licensing objectives, which you've previously alluded to, Chair: the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children. So the 28-day consultation period ran from the 18th of September 2021 to the 15th of October 2021. The obligatory blue notice was displayed by West Berkshire licensing officers at the location and in the main council offices. Responsible authorities and town council were notified of the application by email accordingly. So during the statutory consultation period, the licensing authority received representations to support the review application, and I believe they were from Jodie Wilson, Environmental Health, and from Thatcham Town Council.
Is that it, Brad? Yeah.
Yes, that's right, Chair. Yeah.
Members, do you have any questions for our licensing officer? Councillor Drummond.
Chairman, can I ask you, Mr. Timms, when the temporary licence been handed out, why wasn't it checked against the previous conditions?
It's not something that I'm privy to be honest with you, Councillor. I've been drafted into this last minute. I am aware that the temporary event notice was issued. However, I wouldn't be able to provide that information to you at the moment.
Do you think that's something the authority should be looking at for future events?
Potentially, I think as a local authority, we take each case individually and look at it case by case. As I say, I've been drafted into this sort of lastminute.com. So with regards to the 10, I am aware that it was in relation to a wedding back in, I believe, in August of this year. So the temporary event notice was granted for that specific activity. So with regards to the question, it would be, I think, more pertinent to relate it to potentially the license on an individual basis as opposed to in generic form.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now open it up to other attendees for questions, and I see that Councillor Simon Pike has his hand raised.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question about the original licence, if that's okay. So paragraph 17 states that before licensable activities start, the applicant shall submit and agree to noise management plans and agree them with the council's environmental health department. Has that taken place? Thank you.
Would you like me to answer that? No, we haven't received a noise management plan.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of our licensing officer? I see no hands raised. So could I then turn to the applicant, ask him to introduce himself and to make his presentation to the hearing? So you have 10 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, my name's Nigel Bryant. I'm representing the properties that surround Pinchington, and that's primarily a new development called Wellingtonia Drive. There are 13 properties, of which I think 9 are now in occupation, but also the other local properties and 2 other lodges that are on the boundaries of Pinchington. I moved in to Wellingtonia. We as a family were the first people that moved to Wellingtonia Drive on the 21st of April. And we knew nothing about the backgrounds of the license that Pinchington had received. Didn't come up on any searches. And the agent told us that it was a residence that had some upmarket bed and breakfast every now and again, and never thought anything more of it. So we'd lived there for about a week, and then it kicked off. There was an event that was taking place there end of April. That next week, there were probably about 20 to 30 young adult men. They were playing football, and there was a lot of swearing, drinking going on in the afternoon. I thought, well, okay, you know, they're having a bit of fun next door. That went on till, I don't know, probably 2 in the morning, and then it kicked off again the next day. I thought, well, okay, you know, I'm a reasonable person. I'll just pop by and have a polite word, you know, just to find out what was going on. So went round and I went to the big gates that outside the house, and there was an intercom. So I thought, well, I'll press this, and it didn't go through to anybody. And I thought, well, how on earth? I mean, who lives here? How do I get hold of them? So then I went and looked up Pinchington Hall on the internet, and then found out that it was run by an external commercial company called Phoenix. And I had to go through to them. And then I found out about the license and thought, my goodness, you know, I hope this isn't going to be a problem. The next week, I was out jogging late afternoon, coming back through the common, just enjoying learning about the vicinity. We'd moved over from Kent. And there was this loud booming music coming across Greenham Common. And I thought, where on earth is that coming from? And as I got closer to home, past Thornford Park Hospital, I realized it was coming from Pinchington Hall. And so we got into the house, and I looked out the window, and because we're only about, I don't know, 6 or 7 meters from it. And I could see vans outside the back of Pinchington, and they were delivering new mattresses into the building. And we thought, crikey, there's something pretty serious going on here. And then the music started. People were piling in. I mean, I don't know how many people were there, but there were a lot of people. The noise went on probably till about, it went on till about 8 o'clock in the evening, and then stopped, and then kicked off again about 10 in the evening, and went through till probably 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I called the police, and the police told me politely that it was nothing to do with them. We ought to speak to environmental control. So I called environmental. That didn't open until Monday morning. So I'm thinking, well, crikey, we've got no support here. What do we do? These events were sporadic. So there were a number of major events, and all of it was then infilled with what we believe is Airbnb, which I know is nothing to do with your licensing, but this was almost every single night, and it went on all the way from the date we moved in up until the date when Phoenix got the noise abatement notice towards the end of August. So that's a little bit about the background. I mean, we were very upset. Then the planning went in for weddings and venues, which got rejected because you know, it was seen that it was noisy, that there was no travel, there were travel requirements, no bus services to the area. So that all happened. All of this has been going on. It's been a really traumatic time for the residents as they've moved in and experienced what's been going on at Pinchington. So that's a bit about the background. Before I want to quickly touch, before I move on to the license itself, just a few other items that need to be considered. This is a residential house with for planning purposes. It's had its planning application refused for weddings and events on the grounds of lack of transport, concerns over fire safety, the close proximity of the residential properties, noise, etc., etc. We believe that it would need a change of use even for commercial Airbnb. And even they've got problems with their bins. I mean, we've had so much rubbish behind the fence. We've seen rats crawling through the fence and found huge buildups of rubbish. Although it's a residence, they're paying residential council tax. This is a commercial premises. We've had 9 bins put out on the street from Pinchington. That's a little bit about the background. I'll move on to the licensing objectives, which I'm sure you've all seen the report that I've written. And I've categorized it under the 4 main headings of the grounds that would create a review. And the first one was the crime and disorder. I did not witness personally that recorded music that was taking place with all the swearing online. And I did not personally witness this person, the pictures of this person who was in that band taking drugs in the grounds of Pinchington Hall. But I have witnessed the little canisters, those drugs that were outside the front gate. And I think that was done around the period of rubbish being taken away, strewn all over outside the gates of the hall. I have experienced the loud music, the events that apparently, if I've understood correctly, Phoenix say it's nothing to do with us, Gov. It's not a licensable event. I find that quite a weak sort of barrier to hide behind. And I would also just say that at the big wedding where they ended up getting the noise abatement notice, Phoenix were present on site. So I'm a bit struggling with a little bit that it's a private wedding. Public safety, one of the main issues, and I mean, that's not my gripe, but anybody that knows anything about that house and the refurb that's taken place there, it's on 3 floors, it's bedrooms, it's lounges, boot room, dining room, and in the basement, it's got a cinema room. It has not been kitted out for 120 people to attend events. There are no fire exits, there are no fire doors, there are no sprinklers, no fire detection. The basement is a death trap. I mean, it's got one little staircase coming out of it without any proper fire exits or escapes. I mean, if there's ever a fire in there and there's an event, someone's going to end up going to court over that. Prevention of public nuisance. Well, I've mentioned, you know, the noise and disturbance from a number of very loud events, the rubbish build-ups, the very noisy wedding event that took place in August, that they got a noise abatement issued by environmental control for, the stag party. I've mentioned a number of these things. Protection of children. The lady that lives in the lodge had her child, a stone was thrown at her child from within the boundaries of Pinchington during an event that took place there. It was actually the event in June, the one that I mentioned, where there was the very loud music booming from the property. And I've attached videos of these events that, you know, you can witness for yourselves. We're not making it up. It's real. It was real. So that is a little bit about the reasons why we believe that license shouldn't be there. We do believe it's breaking all of the rules.
Sorry to interrupt, there's just 1 minute left.
Okay. So in conclusion, I would say the neighbours, and there are more and more neighbours moving in, we are upset and fed up. We do not agree with environmental health's potential answer to this, to keep the events indoors and not outdoors. It's all single glazed. As far as we can see, large glazing. When people walk out of that building, we've experienced it, to come out smoking. The noise just comes out with them, and then it's intermittent. It's even worse for sleeping. We believe that all of the licensing and all the planning rules that are in place are being abused, and we would strongly recommend that this license is revoked. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bryant.
Thank you.
So do members have any questions? Councillor Rolls.
Thank you, Chair. I have a number of questions, if I may. Thank you very much, Mr. Bryant, for your submission. Can I just ask you a few questions around a few things you mentioned? You mentioned several events. Could you just give me a little bit more context in terms of how many events over what period? You mentioned when you moved in, and you mentioned the wedding, which has had much focus on it. Could you just sort of give me a bit more feel for number? Well, you mentioned frequency.
Yeah, so the frequency of noise coming from there up until the noise abatement was almost every day. What I would say were events that were not gone through the license. I would say the stag party, in my opinion, was a proper event that took place towards the end of April. There was a definite proper event in the week after that, I believe, early June, where I can't even begin to tell you. I don't know how many people were in there, but the music went on till 2:33. Beds being brought into the property. These were mattresses in vans. That for me was a major event. And then I would say most of the other stuff then was Airbnb until the wedding on the 19th of August. There was a big event before my time that was reported by other neighbours. There was an event just pre-COVID, in the summer of 2020, and then I think things went dead during the COVID period.
Okay, so forgive me, Chairman, if I may. So actually, the Airbnb is the sort of daily activity more than the
I will be totally honest and upfront here. Since the noise abatement order was issued, we have not had any issues with Pinchington. It has gone quiet, but yes. So it was not knowing also what was coming up and when. I mean, you know, it's one thing knowing about an event which is managed or unmanaged, but you never know when it's going to happen. We couldn't go out in our garden. It was just horrific. It was so unsettling, not knowing. Quite often I called, so I got a number for the chap Mark Beachy Smith. He gave me, I met up with him outside one of the events early on in June, and he gave me his number. I called him so many times over that period, probably about 1 o'clock, when we couldn't deal with it anymore. Never answered the phone, never responded in the morning, never.
Okay. So there's been no communication between yourself or other residents and Pinchington Hall, whether it would be the licensee or
yes. So I didn't hear from Mark. I think I communicated him once. I got nothing, and then I got a message from Linda Beachy Smith. It was curt and quite short, saying, "Don't bother Mark. You need to speak with me."
Okay.
After Mark had given me his number to contact him, so I wasn't contacting the wrong person. He gave me his details.
May I ask one other question?
Of course, yes.
Forgive me, I'm not over familiar with the site. Can you just give me a feel for how close in proximity the residents are, and how many houses? I'm sure it may be in my report, but I just can't picture it.
There are 13 new houses on Wellingtonia Drive. And they're generally, we live in, there's 3 news houses. The closest one is about 1.5 meters from the boundary fence of Pinchington. And then the other houses around the close, they surround the grounds of Pinchington to the north, east and south. And then also to the east and south, there are 2 lodges, which must have, I don't know the history particularly well, but must have belonged to the big house Pinchington, you know, before it was split up. So they are on its boundaries as well. And then to the west of the property, across the road, you have Thornford Park Hospital. So every boundary, you can't put an event outside anywhere in that boundary and not affect someone. You can't.
Thank you.
Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. By way of introduction, my name is Peter Thompson. I moved into Wellingtonia Drive in early August with my wife. Just to explain a little bit about you asked a question about the scenario we're facing. Our property shares approximately 15-metre boundary with Pinchington Hall. Our property has 2 bedrooms, which face directly onto the external areas of Pinchington Hall. And for example, I think our bedrooms, if you measured the complete distance, are probably about 20 metres from an area in Pinchington Hall, which is currently licensed to screen outdoor movies. A property next to us, which isn't occupied yet, but will be soon, that shares approximately 50-metre boundary with Pinchington Hall. So that property, when it is occupied, is potentially more affected than any other property in the area. And just to add something to Mr. Bryant's statement in terms of evidence, as I say, we moved in early August. During the first weekend we were there, the whole weekend was blighted with loud and boorish behaviour, both outside and inside. just to support what Mr. Bryant has been saying about disturbances coming from inside.
Sorry, Mr. Thompson, the 10 minutes for support of the review have been eaten up. So could you keep your remarks?
Sorry, yes,
brief
I'll just
and respond to the question. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Sorry. Yeah, I was just about to say that the noise comes from inside the property, not just outside.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, just one, Chairman. I'd like to ask Mr. Bryant, have you been keeping records of these noises and disturbances?
Yeah, I don't. Unfortunately, I've just started a job building border control points for DEFRA, so that's why I'm down in Dover at the moment. But I got a diary at home, and when it was really bad, all that period from when we moved into the noise abatement. I mean, I was noting in there, and I was looking back, and it was every single day. I mean, I haven't got that here, but I have made notes. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I just have one more question. Mr. Bryant, you mentioned, you made several comments about the internal layout of Pinchington Hall and several comments around fire extinguishers, etc. Have you actually been in there yourself and inspected that? Was that based on your own knowledge?
I'm as a profession, I am a surveyor. So, but I started life as a quantity surveyor. I do project management. But I'm not an expert in those fields, but I can see quite clearly on the plans that you've provided with the agenda, you can see quite clearly that house was designed as it's a large building, but it's a residence with 5 bedrooms, and all the usual stuff. The builders who were very close with the developer for Pinchington knows an awful lot more about that, and he has spoken to me about that. But you can see on the plan with the cinema rooms in that basement, there is only one way out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, members. I will, Mr. Bryant, you mentioned your log that you don't have with you, but you talk about every night. In terms of the licensing objective of public nuisance, are you complaining about disturbance every night, or only for the larger events that you've described?
I mean, look, I don't fully understand. Obviously, I'm not an expert in licensing. I've been brought to this because there was a problem, and you'll know the nuances and far better than I will. The upset was every night is an exaggeration. It could be 5 or 6 nights. It could have been 3 or 4 nights on different weeks, but it was, and then and those B type events, plus then the event, the really big gatherings. I mean, all of it has been horrific. It has been horrible and depressing. And I had the lady who moved in the house. She's right on the boundary. I mean, she was being woken up at 5 in the morning with people coming out and breakfasting drunk, and finding fag butts in the garden. And can you imagine how upset someone, you've just moved into your new house, you're all excited, and then you find that's going on. I mean, it's really, really upsetting.
I was just trying to explore the extent of the everyday aspect of this.
At times it was every day. It went on, and I don't know whether there were different bookings or it was, at times it was every day.
Okay, thank you. Could you just tell me, in terms of the photographic evidence that has been provided, who actually took those photos and under what circumstances?
No, I don't. So we have, since, as people have moved in, and in defence of the wedding and venues application, we have a close network now of local people who have got together on a WhatsApp group to discuss what's going on. And also, if it got noisy at the time, just to make sure that people were doing their on their noise apps, so that we could properly get, to get organised. So other people, I can't actually remember someone or some people in our very local group have been on the web and then found that it was very easy to find and found those pictures of what was going on next door. So I can't claim to have found them myself, and I can't remember which couple, which household. I'm told it was number 6 Wellington. Yeah.
Okay. And
I
finally,
took those drugs that were outside the gates. I took those as I was driving back into Wellingtonian Drive, and I saw all the canisters. I took those photos. I took the photos of the bins, of the bin build-up from the house next door to them. You could see it all from the window. That house is right on its boundary, and you could smell it. It was stank.
could you tell me when you took the photo of the canisters?
The date.
Well, of which event that it relates to?
I don't know that it related to event. It may have been an Airbnb. I don't know. I suspect it probably fell out of their rubbish when they tried to take it out to the road. Sorry, my wife says she's got the date of that. I can't. She'll check.
Okay, thank you. Can I just check, are there any more questions from anyone to the applicant? Right. Can I also check that everyone has heard that exchange of questions and responses?
Could I just add, Councillor, I did, I think on the day, send those photos to Jodie Wilson from Environmental Health, and it wasn't like I made it. It was on the day, I think. Or,
okay.
Yeah.
Jodie, you have your hand up?
Yes, I did receive that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Fine. Thank you very much, Mr. Bryant.
Okay, thank you.
Could I now invite the licence holder, Mrs. Beachley Smith, to introduce herself? Can I check? I think I've just done that. No, I don't think so. Yeah. Well, I've invited everyone to do it. All right. You have 10 minutes to for this session. Is that divided between 2 of you or just?
My name's Linda Beachy Smith, and obviously I'm the licence holder, and also I have the tenancy agreement on Pinchington Hall, which is in fact in my name, not in Phoenix Apartments, but obviously that's a technicality. First and foremost, there have been no weddings held at Pinchington. We don't have a wedding licence. We haven't applied for a wedding licence. It'd be something that thought of in the future, possibly. The events, as they have been described, have been private hires. In the main, there was one in April 20, which was a delayed, and it was a wedding reception for a wedding that had already taken place, again, because of various things with COVID and what have you. Obviously, people's weddings had been cancelled or minimised. So that was a private hire. I believe that is the one where the police were called because of breach of COVID rules. They found nothing to be alarmed about and said there was no cause for complaint. That was a one-off event. There has been no stag parties. The other bookings have been through Airbnb, occasionally private hire direct to us, but in the main Airbnb, and we have that all obviously documented. And during COVID, when the bookings go through Airbnb, not only do we apply our rules about what can and can't happen in terms of people, Airbnb were very strict on clarifying with anyone booking how many people could attend, given whatever the rule was prevailing at the time. And the big reception was when we had the rule of 30. And that was adhered to. The guests, the booking guest had 30 guests, and then some went and they had some other guests join, but at no point did they exceed the 30 rule. And that was corroborated by the police. The other event was a baby shower, if we call it an event, That went on we did actually check that one in the afternoon to make sure that, but obviously it's quite difficult when it's an Airbnb booking. It's a private booking. They don't expect to have me on site no more than anybody booking a cottage or anything else on Airbnb would expect the owner to turn up. But we do inspect. We often check through the gates. We checked on that. It was a baby shower. It was all going ahead according to how they said it was going to go ahead, and it was booked through Airbnb. However, on that particular occasion, we did attend again in the evening because it became clear to us that more people had arrived. And it turned out the baby shower had finished as they said it was going to. It was going to finish at 8 o'clock. That was fine. But it was a chief army officer who was going on a 6-month secondment. And he took it upon himself to invite some friends and family to do some farewell. So I've had a bit of a farewell event. We did attend. I don't know why Mr. Bryant thinks we don't attend, but we did attend. At that point, people were leaving by taxi. However, there were some more people in the house who clearly had been drinking. And so we thought it was sensible to say, right, okay, whoever can disperse in taxis, disperse now. If they were driving, obviously we didn't want them dispersed because you don't want them out on the road driving while drunk. And we attended again at 7 o'clock in the morning and made sure the rest of the people had all left accordingly. So that one we did monitor. The next event was a year later, in the one we're talking about in August, which again was a wedding reception for a wedding that had taken place much earlier in the year. And obviously under COVID rules had not been able to have the friends and family that they would have wished. So it was a delayed reception. We did inform environmental health it was going ahead. It was a private booking. The TENS was issued to the caterer of that event. It circumnavigated us. We didn't even know it had been issued. We'd already given our rules to the booking guest, saying what could and couldn't happen in terms of music, in terms of timings. Obviously, we don't provide any licensable activities at all. We don't provide alcohol. We don't provide food. We have not held a licensable activity. The only one that's gone on there has been this TENS. And even at that, and Mr. Bryant is right, we did attend because we were a little bit alarmed that a TENS had been given outside of our rules to the guest. And we found that the TENS actually allowed music to 11:30, and we said, no, the music must finish at I think it was 10 to 11 it finished. And my colleague was there all day to ensure that that did happen. Because had we been operating under the license that I do have, that would have been our licensing rules. So I wasn't quite sure how a TENS could then exceed the licensing rules that we would have had we been operating. But of course, we weren't operating a licensable event. So it was a bit of a catch-22 situation. So those are the main events. Everything else has been private and Airbnb bookings, with the exception of 2 one-day video shoots that were done up there for a music video, mostly filmed inside. There are 2 of those were done, which again is a non-licensable event. Again, we don't provide any licensable activities, never have. So there seems to be a lot of cross wires about what we are or aren't doing. We did make a planning application. It was rejected, and we are going to reapply with an amended application in due course. We have tried on many occasions, and I know Jodie Wilson tried to get some meetings with the residents because I felt it would be prudent if we talked. I could listen to their concerns and we could work what would be an acceptable use of what is an enormous house. It's a beautiful development. It is of historic interest, and one would imagine that it should be used for some sort of sensible purpose. It hasn't sold, which is what the owners primarily would like to have done. They'd like to have sold the property. It was in a very expensive renovation and went into far more money than I think they appreciated. There's never been any secret on our part about us having the license. I've been accused of not being able to be contacted. I have an office in Cheap Street with signs on it. My phone numbers, we've given out our phone numbers, and the only reason I asked Mr. Bryant to contact me rather than Mark is because my husband's a book publisher and was very, very busy at the time. And I felt it was more prudent that I should be dealing with it because I directly know what bookings are coming in, and what's coming up, going to be going on. In terms of the event on the 19th of August, we did advise environmental health that it was going to be a fairly large group of people there, how we were going to manage it. And that actually would like them, as the residents don't ever make contact with me, perhaps to advise the residents this was going ahead and that the music would finish by 11 and the guests would be dispersing quietly. And actually the wedding, the couple whose wedding reception it was, actually had somebody on site the whole time to manage it, to make sure that parking was sensible, no parking out on the roads, no obstructions to the gates, because there's a shared entrance. So one of the big issues have been all these complaints have been directed either directly to the council, environmental health, or even to Airbnb, which is actually based abroad, not to me. So we're never able to remedy it. I mean, if there is, Mr. Bryant or anybody else notices something going on that they feel is inappropriate, if they call us, we will attend. I've been running serviced accommodation for 12 years. My phone is on 24/7. I have to take the calls whether I like it or not. So to say that he's made all these calls and we don't respond is ridiculous. We have a complete, what's the phone system that we have? It's got 4 different numbers, isn't it? We can be contacted. It's available the whole time for anyone who's got queries on anything to do with the properties that we run. But all I can reiterate, and so the rest of the time, so to say that this noise has gone on and on and on is ridiculous. We're talking about sometimes a family of 6 being there, or a couple of families staying there. We've had people from China and all sorts staying there, but they're family bookings, they're staycations. They're people catching up when it's been appropriate, when COVID rules have allowed, to have a family get together, a short holiday. We've had the people from the residents filming children over the gates, which has been inappropriate. It seems to have been very intrusive behaviour when people are, I think anyone in this room, if they were hiring that house to get together with their family or a group of friends, would not appreciate constantly being photographed from the top of the buildings opposite.
Sorry, there's 1 minute left.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the bins, that was unfortunate. We had applied to the council for larger bins, domestic bins, and we were told, no, actually, we couldn't have domestic bins. So we then arranged for the commercial bins that we now have. We had a caretaker on site who we had to ask to leave because, unfortunately, he was bringing problems to the party. And I think there was a little bit of unpleasant behaviour about the rubbish. We remedied it that very day it was reported to us. We had it all cleaned up. We had the waste company came out that morning as an emergency, removed all the rubbish, brought the first bin that they had, the second bin, the recycling bin came a week later. And we now have bi-weekly collections and we sanitize the area. And there was never, I have not ever seen rats or anything like that. But I do agree on that day, it was an unpleasant mess. But we remedied it as quickly as we possibly could, including all of us going up there, clearing it up, staff, all of us, to make sure, because it was unpleasant and shouldn't have happened. Apart from that, I don't think there's anything else to add.
Thank you. Members, do we have any questions for the licence holder?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much, Ms. Billy-Smith. You say you're adhering to all the conditions, even if it's a private hire.
Yes.
I mean, there's 13 of them. So you say you haven't broke any of them?
No, what I'm saying is we've never had a licensable event. What we do when we take any booking, whether it's through Airbnb or private booking, we are my colleague Greg, who's not present today, goes through a very strenuous list of what is the event, who is staying, are you planning to have other people come to visit? If so, how long with it? And so it goes on. So that's what I mean in terms of how we control. But as it's not a licensable event at any point, it's just not licensable. So we don't feel we need to go through that. What we do put is our own rules alongside the stringent rules that Airbnb operates under, particularly through the COVID period. So we reiterate, we don't want amplified music. They can only have a domestic speaker. And on that wedding on the 19th of August, it was a domestic speaker. There was no big speakers or anything like that. It was one domestic speaker, which anybody might have at a barbecue party. But in answer to your question, we put our own rules in place on how we think the house should be operated, but not licensable because we're not providing anything. No, we don't provide catering or alcohol or music or anything else, DJs, nothing. It's a bit of a grey area because, of course, it's not a licensable activity.
I mean, can't you understand why the people are complaining at all? You just think they're making it up?
No, not at all. I think if anyone who's got legitimate concerns has every right. But that's what I don't understand, why there's never been any wanting to meet, but they come to the house. Again, I don't know how Mr. Bright knows the cinema in the cellar, because that wouldn't be on the plans. That is something we've put in. It's small, it seats 8 people. There is a fire escape in the cellar. And actually, on a quick point, going on. We have had a visit from the fire officer, and he has now stated what things he now needs us to put in place to do with it being Airbnb, not to do at the moment with it being licensable, because even Airbnb properties now are coming under the radar of fire safety. And we've now started to put those things into place. We also, at very long last, GigaClear finally put the internet in, so we can now put the cameras that we would want to put in. We couldn't before because they wouldn't operate. They finally completed that work 2 weeks ago. So we're now seeking to put the cameras in, which will be 8 cameras around the building, including being on the gate, which will then be connected to our phones. And so we can then obviously monitor again remotely, much more accurately than. That's, I can understand the concerns. What I can't understand is why nobody's ever wanted to approach me to sit and have a sensible discussion on what would be an acceptable use of the house, what would be acceptable number of slightly larger events, if we're going to call them that might take place. Bearing in mind, sake, it can't be weddings. We don't have a wedding license. That would be my concern. Why all these comments? And there has been very many. There's been everything under the sun complained about, but not directly to me or to my colleagues.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Rolls.
Yeah, thank you. So you started your submission by saying that you didn't hold any weddings and that there weren't any weddings, but then you went on to talk about the wedding, I think on the 19th of August.
Sorry, I meant reception, not, there's no wedding. We cannot hold a wedding because we don't have a
So
wedding.
you meant wedding reception?
Their reception.
So it's accepted that this wedding reception took place on the 19th?
Yes, it was a reception.
Okay. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify that in my mind because it seemed to contradict that. What's slightly confusing me is that wedding was under the TENS license, a temporary license for that event.
Yeah.
Why wasn't it held under your license?
Because we don't hold licensable events. We were not aware they were going to apply for a TENS. They didn't consult that this is the caterer, and the TENS was given by West Berkshire without my knowledge. We only found, I think, through Jodie Wilson.
So nobody consulted you on using your premises to apply for this license, and you had no knowledge whatsoever
until just before.
And then obviously there's all these problems that have.
Yeah.
Okay. I have one other question, and it was referred to at the beginning of the meeting about the noise abatement. Sorry, the noise. Yeah, point number 17 on your license about submitting a noise abatement plan, management plan.
No, that's noise management.
Noise management plan. Has that? I'm just curious as to. My understanding is that hasn't been done because the officer confirmed that. I wonder why that hasn't been done.
Because we weren't doing a licensable event.
I'm just talking about your license. The terms of your license. Oh, I see. What you're saying is that wasn't a licensable activity. Therefore, you haven't submitted your noise management plan.
Yeah, had we got the planning, and then we would then go on to want to hold licensable, we would then we have to do several things. But due to COVID and due to the fact we weren't holding any licensable events, we haven't done all of those things yet until we get the planning. Because what you really have, you've got a license and then you've got a property. And until the planning allows for the license to operate, thus making it more of a business, it hasn't really been, the noise abatement has been issued because of the TENS.
Yeah, I understand that. So what you're saying, just to clarify my own mind, because you haven't held a licensable activity at the premises, you haven't submitted your noise management plan.
Right.
But may I ask you, my understanding is you don't need planning permission to exercise your license as it stands at the moment. So that the terms of your license that are in place for you to do to do those activities that you are that are under your license.
No, that's not correct, because as I say, it's a little bit, it's a bit of a conundrum really, because I have a license and I have a premises, but the premises is a C3 dwelling. So if you like, really the license and the planning should have been done at the same time. But because of COVID, the license was already in going ahead. I then didn't go for the planning because given COVID, I had no idea, quite frankly. I mean, the rest of my business is a hospitality business. Quite frankly, I had no, like so many other people, had no idea how this was going to pan out at all. I mean, COVID's had a serious effect on anything to do with hospitality. So what I have is a license and I have a premises, but until the correct planning permissions are in place, we would not hold licensable events, which is why when the Thames was issued, we were surprised because we wouldn't have allowed a licensable event, but the Thames then allowed it.
Thank you. Can I ask one other question? So we've seen lots of photographic evidence of you mentioned the rubbish and some of the other activities from sort of some pictures that we've been supplied with. What are your comments on those?
Well, again, they appear to be taken off Instagram. This is all, everything is retrospective. Nothing, like, for instance, the canisters outside the gates, it's beyond me to understand why anyone would go through the electronic. You have to drive up to the gates to make them open. You can't manually open them. Why anyone would drive down a drive, out through gates, and then deposit all that stuff. The house has got huge grounds, huge woods. Why would anyone do that? And the photographs are from Instagram. I have no idea the times, when, not brought to my, how can I put something right if something's not brought to my attention? I mean, I live in Newbury now. I can be at Pinchington in less than 10 minutes. So somebody calls one of our either out of hours lines or in hours lines, of which we have many, one of us could be there within minutes. But this never brought to our attention. We find out about it retrospectively.
Can I just, sorry, Chairman, do you mind just follow on from that? So, I mean, the applicant mentioned about trying to get hold of yourselves to discuss this. Is there like a management team that is, or are there other people that are at the end of those phone lines, or does it go directly to you? Because
it diverts. It'll go to whoever doesn't answer it. It'll go to the next person. So there's never been any reason.
So you have a team of people that you can contact.
It's 24/7. So it will go. If for instance, Greg is my colleague, it generally goes to him first. If it doesn't go to him, then I would pick up. We can all hear it ring. It's whoever gets to it first, really. And those phones are on. I mean, for instance, my colleague, I'm aware, was working at 2 o'clock this morning, answering something.
Can I ask you, have you actually reached out to the residents to try and discuss this further and to take on board their comments a bit more? So actually proactively contacting the residents?
We did
yourself?
try that. I think Jodie Wilson from Environmental Health was trying to get a meeting together with, because obviously she was having closer contact. I didn't know who the residents were or when they were moving in or any timeframes. Nobody has ever personally approached me. Jodie Wilson was trying to get a meeting to bring everyone together. It was declined. I was more than happy. I felt people should come into the house, see the house, see the layout of the house, see how it, and the comment is not appropriate for 120 people. Of course it's not. It's 6 bedrooms. But there is space in the grounds with a marquee or a TP to have additional people outside. But nobody's ever done that. And I'm not aware, and the house has got fire extinguishers and we've had long discussions with the fire department. We adhere to everything anyone asks us to do. But the residents have not wanted that meeting. And I say 90% of everything that's been said, of which you probably all gather there's been plenty, has circumnavigated me. It's gone direct to, at one point, I think an email went out to about 40 different departments. And I was just copied in on it. But nobody seems to want, given the proximity, I mean, I think we'd all agree it's a disastrous development to have the houses and the big house so close together. It's a mistake in a development, if you ask me. However, it is what it is. Now, you've got a very large house that needs to be used, hasn't sold, can't stand empty, because that's not going to be anyone's benefit either. It lends itself to be for very small occasions. It doesn't lend itself to festivals or anything like that. And I don't understand why the residents, given that they're living next door to, which is a beautiful building. It has a long history, and not all of it good, I grant you, in Newbury. And that's another thing, it needs a new history. But nobody wants to talk to me. Nobody wants to sit down and say, okay, what is a good way forward?
I'll come back to you. Can I ask, in your private hiring and through Airbnb, you referenced several times that you have stringent conditions of
Yes.
hire. Do those conditions of hire have anything to do with preventing any disturbance or noise management?
Yeah, we ask for sound, that there to be no real amplified sound beyond something like a domestic speaker that you might have if you're having a barbecue or a family party or whatever. The music must, we are stopped by 10 outside, our rules, nothing to do with the licensing rules, but our rules, because we think it's inappropriate that music should go past 10 o'clock. And then to come in, we are one of the big issues, most of the reception rooms are, as you look at the building, to the right-hand side, whereas Wellingtonian Court is to the left. There is a large kitchen and dining room, and there are French doors leading out to the sort of small patio area, which would be to the side of Wellingtonian Court. We have a note on that, and we ask them not to have those doors open after, I think it's 9 o'clock, we often say. Please close those doors and don't use that area. Now, there was a complaint that somebody used it for breakfast early in the morning when we had that in, they'd arrived from America, so I think their timing, the body clocks were out of sync anyway. But it was when we had that ludicrously hot weather, and there was a complaint that people were breakfasting outside. I don't know how far you can stop people enjoying a property, what becomes appropriate and what becomes actually just a little bit ridiculous, really. Surely anyone can sit outside at 5 o'clock if you choose to. I mean, it doesn't happen very often in England, does it? So that's how our rules. So that's to answer your question, yes. And we put those, especially when it's an Airbnb booking, we put it alongside the Airbnb rules. You know, there's going to be so many people and check-in times and check-out times and where to put the rubbish. Everything is set out for them.
I mean, given the nature of the complaints, what measures do you put in place to ensure compliance with your own rules?
Well, all we can do is to ask people to comply. Most people are very compliant with the rules. I strongly refute there was ever any day after day after day noise, because I don't know where it would come from. You can't say that every family that books up there has a hoopla outside. Quite often the weather doesn't permit it. Quite often the COVID rules only allowed maybe 6 people to be there, or at one point I had a complaint about the fact we allowed a teepee company to just to photograph some teepees in the grounds. So the 2 people came up to erect the teepees, they left, then the photographer came up and my colleague Greg attended. It was just a promotion for them while the place was actually empty. That got a complaint that I'd broken COVID rules. We hadn't. But I don't know how many more rules we can put in place. We can only then hope that the guests adhere to them, which is why, again, now with the GigaClear finally finishing their work and we can have cameras, we can, of course, then monitor much more closely. If we're expecting, say, 12 people to stay in the house, you don't expect that the gates are open 30 times in an hour. So, the cameras will be trained on the gates, so we'll know how often the gates will open. So we are putting more and more rules in place. We're more than happy to put as many rules in place as it's viable to still make it an enjoyable experience for somebody booking the house.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson, you had a question? Sorry. Oh, sorry. Yes. Okay. Sorry.
Sorry, just on that point, it's interesting that obviously you can put rules in place, but have you changed anything? And it's sort of slightly repeating the question that the chairman's just asked. Have you actually changed anything to address where the rules may have been broken? So in terms of putting rules down, because this is obviously having an impact on your license in terms of here we are today. So where you have received complaints and you're aware of complaints, have you done anything differently rather than outside of just telling people that these are the rules to enforce those? So any change in terms of your approach to enforce them? Because I think if the complaints continue to come in and you're telling people not to do things, it's to my mind not working, or if that is the case that these are genuine complaints. Have you put anything in place to address that?
Well, yes, as I say, insofar as like one of the things was the noise at the back of the house if people were outside. So that's one of those rules we put into play, that area doesn't get used late at night, doors are shut. So we do try and comply.
Enforcing it, I'm talking about, because putting a rule, imparting the fact that there is a rule is one thing, but actually trying to enforce it.
Well, the only way we
another.
can enforce it is if we've asked the guest to do X, Y, and Z, but then it's brought to our attention that one of those things or all of those things aren't being adhered to, we would then attend. And a couple of times we have attended. But what my problem is, we're not made aware of it until it's retrospective. So so it's almost like we're not given the opportunity to go and say to the guest, no, I'm very sorry, but we did say to you, please shut this door, or please don't have your music. So we're asked, and we would attend and have attended if anything has been brought to our attention. And sometimes we go up on, fortunately, I persuaded the owners to put the metal gates in as opposed to the wooden gates that were there before. So what we often do is one of us will pop up there and just go to the outside, look through the gates and say, all right, we were expecting 6 cars. There are 6 cars. There's not 40 people meandering around the place. So we do run it as strictly as we possibly can, treading the line between allowing quiet enjoyment of people booking a place to have their holiday or break.
Can I just ask one other question? Do you keep a log of all the complaints that you receive?
Yes, I think Reg has got a log of all those, hasn't it? Yes, we have got a log.
And how many have you received on that log?
What, retrospectively?
Over the last period that we've been talking about?
These are the ones retrospective, isn't it? The ones that about the events, as they're called, these receptions. Most of the others, no, we don't get to hear about.
So how many complaints have you received since the period that we've been talking about? I think, is it the applicant referred to since he moved in 2020, I think. If you look from August.
No, sorry, I moved in April the 21st, and the noise went through pretty much solidly from then until the wedding event in August.
Do you have a note of how many complaints you've received during that period?
I am unaware of that because I find that quite tricky because of the COVID rules, how there would be that many disturbances. But no, this is what I'm saying, we don't hear about it.
So how many complaints on your log have you got?
I'd have to check back. I think it's mainly just these
right.
Because this is the problem. We're not made aware of it, so we can't remedy. We will hear it through environmental health or through.
But you have a complaints log and there are some on there, but you're not sure how many.
Not sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. And just one thing, I can't remember. You mentioned the local fire authority. Did you say they had no concerns at all?
No. The fire authority have come up because they were made aware of it, I think, by the residents of Wellingtonia Court. They've come up. It's part of a policy now that even nothing to do with being licensable. It's to do with Airbnb, or even properties now on Airbnb are being brought more into the focus of fire safety, because you're talking about people moving into whatever property it might be, and they're not familiar with that property. So they have attended, and they have, and I had a long discussion with them, and several things like extra fire smoke alarms got to put into the bedrooms that have spoke remotely to the ones that are on the landing, locks on the doors that need to be little buttons as opposed to keys. We've gone through all that, and to do with fireproofing of doors. And I'm in discussions with them now. They've sent us through a list of what they would want us to put right. And this is because it's been brought to their attention. But eventually I would have been on the radar anyway, because anybody operating Airbnb, apparently that is something that is taking a while, but they're bringing that now into play, which I suppose is appropriate, really.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I just have one more question. If you had the ability to operate licensable activities, what would you change in terms of your management regime to ensure that the licensing conditions were complied with?
Once it becomes, if we could operate licensable activities, to the rear of that, leading on from where this large kitchen is, we have a second kitchen and a reception room and a toilet. We would have a member of staff on there permanently, in the property permanently, if it was a licensable activity, so we could manage it. We also are intending to have a caretaker. There is a small cottage with the garage separate to the house, where we did have somebody staying, but it didn't work. We would have a full-time caretaker person there who would then obviously be able to make sure that if the rules were that the windows and doors must be shut by 10 o'clock, we've got somebody who can then walk around the building. And so somebody's on site all the time to manage check-ins, check-outs, number of people attending, how the event's going ahead. But we envisage it to be small events anyway. It's sort of got out of hand, this whole wedding thing, like we're going to be having these huge weddings. It's not appropriate for that. We're thinking of much smaller gatherings, from cookery demonstrations, art exhibitions, that sort of thing. It's not, it's kind of gone off piste a little bit, this whole wedding thing. So that's how we would manage it, by having staff present all the time.
Sorry, one more question.
Sorry, just one more question, just following on from that. So if you're not successful with your planning application, do you intend to continue with the type of activities that we've heard about today? So you talk about, if you do get your planning permission, you'd be doing the things that you just outlined. If you don't, do you intend to carry on with this type of activity?
I think it would just carry on as an Airbnb type arrangement, and small staycations, and whatever else.
And what other events that they may apply for their own temporary licenses themselves?
Yeah, well, if the TENS, but again, obviously, that was a learning curve to find that a TENS could be given outside of us knowing it was going to. So we would now, anybody hiring it, one of the questions would be, do you intend to apply for a TENS? Because that would then might dictate whether we'd allow the booking to go ahead or not. And all these bookings are in advance. We don't take a last minute booking. So we are well aware. So there's quite a long discussion period about what it's going to be, et cetera, et cetera. So we would now say that we would reserve the right, if somebody applies for a TENS license outside of our knowledge, that we would cancel the booking. Because it's happened, isn't it? A TENS has been given. I've now got a noise abatement for something that's kind of circumnavigated me again. So that's how we would operate. We almost cancelled this reception because of this TENS being given. We spent hours debating whether but it felt wrong insofar as so many people had disappointing weddings and such like and various things through COVID. We decided to let it go ahead. Probably the wrong decision, given that TENS is now have a noise abatement on as well.
I think that concludes questions from the panel. Can I now invite questions from the applicant or supporter or any other attendee?
Thank you, Chair. May I make just a couple of points in response to what the licence holder has said, and then ask a question? Firstly,
this really has to be questions at this point in time.
All right,
rather than assertions.
I mean, the context of the question is this: since the licence was initially granted, there's at least 4 major changes in circumstance that have happened. Firstly, what was a residential area is even more of a residential area now, given that you're going to have very shortly 14 new families living right next to
Mr. Thompson, the questions have to be relevant to the statements that Ms. Beachley-Hill has been making, rather than making your own points. Sorry.
Well, the question is, given those changes in context on all the evidence that we've heard, how does the licence holder justify retaining this licence, given that it's a licence that they do not use?
Would you like to respond to that?
The licence would be used when the appropriate planning is granted, or obviously if it isn't granted, it won't be used. It just so happened because of COVID, the licence meeting went ahead and the licence was granted. I then didn't apply for planning for quite some time because, as I've stated, I had no way of understanding or knowing, nor did anybody else, how long COVID was going to go on for. I mean, the other side of my business fell off a cliff, as anyone in hospitality will tell you. So I was monitoring the situation for the whole year to see where I stood as a business. So at the moment, the licence isn't being used. because the premises doesn't allow that there isn't appropriate planning. I'm trying to stick to all the rules. The planning doesn't allow the license to be used. Therefore, it hasn't been used and won't be used unless I get planning agreed.
Thank you. I see nobody else remotely or locally asking questions.
Councillor Jones, am I allowed just to ask the question on no one contacting you? I already said, and you know that I don't know if it's your husband or partner gave me his number, and I was constantly leaving messages at night. So how do you justify I never got in contact?
But what if you didn't get hold of Mark? Why did you not ring? Our website gives many numbers. So
your office is open from 9 till 5. That's why.
No. The phone system is on 24/7. Has been for 12 years. It's serviced accommodation that I run. That's equivalent of if something's wrong, it would be the same if you were staying at a hotel. So why I have.
But your husband told me that I should contact him, and that's what I did. He told me, if you've got any issues, contact this number.
He missed one phone call, and then he did go out at 1 o'clock in the morning. I then asked you to contact me rather than him for personal reasons, actually, which I'd rather not go into. However, if he didn't answer, or in fact I didn't answer, one of us can be contacted 24/7. Nobody's come into my offices. Nobody has rung. I have had this levied at me over and over again. In 12 years, I haven't missed phone calls. So I don't know why this has suddenly become such an issue. We have out of hours numbers, we have in hours numbers, and they will always be answered. As I say, my colleague was working at 2 o'clock this morning. I saw it come up. So whatever it might be. So I'm sorry, but it's utter nonsense. We weren't contactable.
And the second question that I'd like to ask, following what you've said, is on these families that visit the house. I think if you look in your records, and you know very well that almost everybody that visited that house were young groups of people who were there to party. And once they've gone, you can tell them whatever rules, the next lot came in and they would party. So do you disagree? Do you say that's not the case?
That's not the case. I mean, we can give you all the supporting evidence through Airbnb, the bookings. Obviously, if you have a booking through Airbnb and somebody says it's a family and it turns out not to be a family, that's slightly beyond my control. But we are very stringent, and these have been family bookings. We've had Russian families, we've had Chinese families, and all this we can provide the evidence of the booking, who was the main booking guest, and the style of the booking, what it was, a family staycation, a get together, a reunion, whatever it might be.
Why do we get footballs and tennis balls coming over the fences then? Anyway, let's move on.
Do you have any further questions?
No, thank you.
Councillor Steve Ardar-Water, you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your statement, Mrs. Beecher-Smith. Now, I recall I like you, attended the virtual initial licensing hearing in May of last year. My recollection is, and maybe members could have got or there's a more detailed record of this. My recollection is that you were at pains to emphasise you would do everything you could and would to effectively manage noise and disturbance. And I do recall you were talking about, again, having an on-site caretaker to manage noise. Would you like to comment on how effective that has been and how effective you could be with the model of both Airbnb lettings as well as your own, given that you would have been making every effort, I'm sure, to reassure residents and the broader community as represented here that you would be a good neighbour?
Well, as I said, we put in place with every booking, we go through it with a fine tooth comb to see what type of booking it's going to be. We ask that the music, if there is going to be, in fact, we ask there not to be music outside, but if there is, it must only be a small portable domestic speaker, the same as any of us may have if we were going to have some sort of summer party or whatever it might be. We've put all that in place. As I say, the constant issue has been that we've not been able to remedy some. If somebody from an Airbnb booking is making too much noise, and I guess it's subjective sometimes as to what's an appropriate amount of noise on a summer evening or whatever it might be, but we can't remedy it if we don't know it's going on. We have to take a certain amount on faith that if they book and it's 12 people come in, 6 adults, 6 children, that it's going to just be a family party. If it develops into something else, and sometimes with Airbnb, that can be, I think, an issue. If it's brought to our attention, we will attend immediately, within 10 minutes.
Thank you, and I appreciate that, and I welcome the fact you have said that, and I note that in your submission you use the words "can only hope" and asked people to comply. My sense is that with the model you are operating under, both yourselves directly and via Airbnb, you can only rely on the goodwill of tenants, of hirers, to behave well and keep noise down. You can only respond if a complaint happens, and frankly, I feel that's not good enough. But again, would you like to? Do you agree with my statement that you can only rely on the goodwill of people who hire your hall?
I suppose, and as I say, that's why we do spot checks through the gates, and we don't want to be intrusive. We do spot checks, and we generally do that on everyone, unless it's a repeat booking and we've had no cause. And we've had quite a few repeat bookings from families when it's been appropriate. However, the whole camera situation now, once those are up, makes it a completely different ball game, because not only will there be cameras outside, there's a requirement for 2 cameras in the main hall. So we will then be able to monitor, without being obviously too intrusive, that things are going according to how we believe they were going to go. So that will be another layer that we can now put in place, which hasn't been possible.
Yeah.
I think
sorry, Mrs. Beecher-Smith, you actually said very clearly last May that this is exactly what you would do. You would control. So responding when a problem happens is almost like shutting the stable door after the horse has bolted. No, unless you have someone on site, which you said you did, you cannot stop noise happening. Yes, you can stop it after a period after it's been happening, but that's a bit too late, as we've heard from the nearby resident.
Right, but again, noise is subjective. I mean, it is a large house. And I know the only other person that put any form of interest in hiring or renting the property was a multi-generational family, which I think there was something like 14 people in that family, of which half were children. So that could have generated a great deal of noise. I mean, you have to have some faith in when people book with you, and we do spot check. And I do think there has been, if I'm perfectly honest, quite a lot of exaggeration about noise, because these are just families with children. And this is what we check. But don't forget, we actually meet these people when they arrive. They don't remind, we do a check-in process with them to go through the house, exits, rules. We meet and greet. That's what we do. So.
Yes, and again, I'm looking at your website right now, the Phoenix Apartment Pinchington Hall. It's got a promotional video with a shot of a bridal couple in an open-topped Jeep, and use the word special occasion. So it's not just families, is it? It is events, and I appreciate you're saying small weddings, but as we all know, the size of wedding that can be accompanied here is not small in the 1 or 2 families or friends. Anyway, that's my impression, frankly, that you're talking a very good talk here. But again, your model makes it impossible to control this properly.
Well, the pictures that you saw, we did do a drone video of the property, because we thought that would be quite an interesting way to show it, which emotional stuff, because as a business, not only obviously do I need to apply for the planning, but you also have to have some idea whether that's going to have any interest. Otherwise, it isn't a business model worth following. So that was some very early promotional. It's actually a colleague and his wife dressing up. It wasn't a wedding, because you have to, as a business, have some idea whether you're actually on track for it to be a viable venture anyway. But I say it hasn't happened as yet because I don't have the planning.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rolls, you have another question?
Yes, thank you. Just on following on from my colleague, Councillor Arder Walter, Can I ask you, so did you actually, I wasn't quite clear in my mind, did you actually commit to have, for example, a presence on site for events when your license was first granted? Because that's my first question, actually. So
If we were having, if we were operating licensable events, yes, we would fully staff.
no, I mean, basically what you're saying is because you haven't operated a licensable event, but I'm talking about in the situation where you have people on your premises operating under whatever license they have obtained. Was there any commitment on your part to make sure that they were adhering to the rules that you had stipulated? And I mean, for example, where it wasn't working potentially because there were complaints, that you would have a presence on site. Was that what you committed
the only
to?
licensable event has been the one where the TENS was issued. And yes, we attended all day long. And my colleague Greg was there all day to make sure, because we were alarmed that the TENS license had been given, because that was outside of what we had set down as the rules for this reception.
Can I ask one other question?
Yeah, but could we don't go over old ground.
Okay. That's fine.
Mr. Bryant.
I would like to pick up on a point.
Mr. Bryant, wait till I've spoken. You have your hand up. Are you asking anything brand new, or is this?
Yes, it is brand new. I wanted to pick up on a point that Mrs. Beachy-Smith made, that she would not apply or do anything under the license because they don't have the planning currently. That's correct? I understood that point correctly. What I'd like to know is early on, when the noise, I know you say it wasn't regular, when it was every night, I actually asked someone to apply to your company to have a wedding. And I think I sent that on to environmental health. I'm not sure. It certainly went to planning, and I know others saw it. We got a full response from your director, Gregor Resnick. This lady got a full response giving how many people she could have at the wedding, all the catering details, the disco details, the bar, everything, and all the prices. So I'd like to understand a little bit more about what you said about you wouldn't apply for anything under the license without you planning.
Yes, we were aware that you made somebody made an approach. We answered it in the event that we had the appropriate. If you read there's Greg's response, in the event that we had, because this is some future date, I can't remember. Yes, we were aware that we were being.
No. This is an early one. This would have been back in May. And when the full response with all the prices came back, and the wedding was said to be in September or October, something like that.
We said yes.
Full response.
We already had the planning in process. Obviously, we got turned down.
No, the planning hadn't gone in at that stage.
Oh, right, well, whatever. We certainly, I know that on part of that, he had put on the obviously this subject to planning being in place. This could not go ahead.
Mr. Bryant, let's.
That's fine. Yeah.
Right, this is a hearing. Okay. I see no other questions from remote attendees. Can I just ensure that everyone attending both in the chamber and remotely has heard that presentation and the exchange of questions and responses?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much, Mrs. Beachy-Smith. I'll now turn to a presentation by the responsible authority, the Environmental Health. Jodie Wilson is here in representing Environmental Health. Can I invite you to introduce yourself and to speak, please?
Hello, I'm Jodie Wilson, Environmental Health Officer. Pardon me if there's any noises. I've got works happening that weren't supposed to be happening still today, so hopefully it's not too noisy. I received Mr. Bryant's application to review the premises licence in my remit as statutory consultee for the prevention of public nuisance licensing objective. I was already familiar with these premises and local residents due to ongoing concerns of nuisance. Pinchington Hall is a beautiful, large and grand looking property which appears to lend itself perfectly to be an entertainment venue. However, the photos on their website and the licence plan, page 24 of your pack, infers that the property is quite remote from residential dwellings. The map is outdated. Immediately to the north is a new Wellingtonia Drive development, now mostly occupied. These residential dwellings are just a few metres from the Pinchington Hall building and boundary fence. There are other properties on the other sides. To my knowledge, no events have been held under the premises licence and no noise management plan has been received, which was required by condition of their licence. Pinchington Hall has been marketed as an entertainment venue benefiting from a premises licence. I believe that the premise being licensed for large groups and entertainment infers that it is a venue where entertainment or parties with music are welcome and encouraged. A number of complaints have been received over recent months, or even longer than that, mostly due to the holiday lets, Airbnbs, but some being the formal party event type. I understand that Phoenix Apartments intend to use the property as an entertainment venue, hence the licence and recently refused planning application. On the 19th of August, an event was held under a temporary event notice. Anyone can apply for a temporary event notice. It doesn't need to be the premises licence holder. A temporary event notice, only the police and environmental health can object. And that can only be on crime disorder grounds in the case of the police, or in prevention of public nuisance in the case of environmental health. The temporary event notice that was applied for the 19th of August was applied by the caterer, and it was for sale of alcohol only. And so for that reason, no objection was made by environmental health because there was no prevention of public nuisance concern directly related to the temporary event notice. So with the temporary event notice being for an outdoor marquee for a wedding reception, I expected that music would be involved. And I raised concerns with Phoenix Apartments and suggested that noise would need careful management given the proximity to residential dwellings that they would need to do to prevent public nuisance from occurring. On the night of the 19th, music was audible outside. It could have been louder. There obviously was some effort to control it. However, it was still audible within property. I could hear lyrics with windows closed, and likewise noise recordings were made from other properties with a fixed noise meter and with the noise app by other residents in the local area. Subsequent analysis of those noise recordings confirmed the same, that noise levels within the properties and within the gardens were unacceptable and intrusive. Our professional opinion was that the noise amounted to a statutory noise nuisance. Where there's a statutory noise nuisance, the council has a duty to serve a noise abatement notice, and one was served. Unfortunately, due to a postal error, it had to be reserved again more recently. That noise abatement notice has been appealed. There was mention about mediation, and all parties were in agreement to informal mediation, but due to the serving of the noise abatement notice, the mediation process had to be cancelled. My concern with the premises licence is twofold. First, I'm concerned that it may not be possible to host licensed events with music without adverse impacts on local residents, as was seen on the 19th of August. And secondly, I believe having a licence allows them to market as a venue and attract groups wanting to entertain or behave more loudly, even if they're not having formal organised events. A licensed venue is unfortunately not suited to this residential area, particularly since it's been redeveloped so closely next door. And the planning refusal for the same use reflects the same concerns. So yeah, if you've got any questions, I'm happy to answer. My colleague Russell is just observing, he won't be speaking today.
Thank you, Chair. I just have one question. Thank you, Jodie. There was mention of a hospital as well nearby to the premises. Was that something that you also took into consideration? Or is it, I'm not sure about the proximity. It was just mentioned, I think, by one of the parties.
There is a hospital. I believe it's a psychiatric hospital, but I'll be honest, I'm not too familiar with it. But equally, there will be people staying there in a sort of residential capacity that could also be impacted by the use of Pinchington Hall as a venue. Not that I've received any complaints from the hospital.
Councillor Drummond.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Olsen. Mrs. Beaky's, Beck, I can't. I was having a stroke, so my brain goes a bit doodle like that. It says it was only a domestic music system. Would you agree to that? That was the case on the night of the complaint of the music.
Sorry, is that question directed at me? I didn't visit the actual marquee and go inside because I didn't want to disrupt the wedding, although I did enter the grounds of the premises. It didn't sound like it wasn't Glastonbury Festival. It wasn't, the loudest sound system I've ever heard, but it was loud enough that it was still audible within the neighbouring property.
But would you say it was a domestic?
I couldn't answer that. If it was a domestic one, it was very high powered, or if it was a commercial one, it was probably a fairly low powered one. But in any case, it was audible within the residential dwellings.
Could your colleague answer that question?
No, he wasn't there at that time. He's literally here to observe the process of the licensing and hearing.
Councillor Rolls.
Thank you, Chair. I just have one other question. You mentioned about the waste, and I think there's a note in the report regarding rodents. Was this like a one-off, or was that something that you observed on a number of occasions, or is it just relating to the wedding event?
So I think it was earlier in August, I received the report from local residents about the bin and was sent a photograph of the bins with sprawling out rubbish, insufficient bin storage for the waste that was there. I can't comment on rats, but with refuse being stored outside the bins, there is a risk that it could attract rats. Then subsequently on the 19th of August, so a few weeks later, after that had all been cleared, on the 19th of August, we visited the premises in relation to the noise from the temporary event notice. And whilst there, although the event was ongoing, there were noticeably rubbish, bin bags all outside of bins, again, insufficient bin storage to accommodate the amount of rubbish that was being generated during the event. That's not to say that they perhaps weren't going to clear it away after the event, but during the process, there was huge areas of rubbish just strewn in their sort of refuse area. And then a few weeks later, I'm not sure on the date, I received another picture of bins that were out on the main road, believed to belong to Pinchington Hall. I can't confirm or whether that's true, that had been left presented out for waste collection for a week and hadn't been collected. So I don't know about that. All of that was reported to the team that deal with waste at the council.
Okay. I have one question, Jodie. You make a recommendation in your report that either the licence conditions are changed to hold events or hold activities inside rather than outside, or that the licence is revoked. Can I ask you which of those you actually are recommending to us?
I personally think that a licence isn't appropriate at this location. It's possible that they could try and have licensable events inside, although whether the size of it lends itself to the types of events they want. I would have concerns about noise control and containing noise within the premises, and we would need to see a noise management plan for that and a noise assessment to show that they can operate, noisy events from within. There are windows that direct in all directions towards the new residential development, as well as the residents that are in the area or were already existing in the area. So there is still a potential of nuisance from noise contained within, albeit it would be better contained within than a marquee, as was the case on the 19th of August.
Okay, thank you. I'd now like to invite questions from the applicant or the licence holder or other attendees. I see, Mr. Bryant, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I haven't got any questions on. I thought Jodie summarised that very well. But what I would add on the bins, and it wasn't me that was dealing with it, it was another resident.
So I'm sorry, you have to limit yourself to questions, not comments. You've had your opportunity to make comments in the past. Can I have
okay, then I would inquire why the bins weren't taken away. I suspect the answer is because it's residential and not commercial. But do you know the reason why the bins weren't being taken away? Because they weren't taken for weeks.
I don't know why that would be. I refer the matter to the colleagues in the waste team, as I'm unsure whether they are using the residential collections, if it's still considered to be a residential property, or given that it's used for Airbnb and sometimes these private parties, whether it requires commercial bins, which they would need to arrange themselves independently of West Berkshire Council.
And presumably pay business rates, not council tax, but yeah, okay.
Again, I wouldn't know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I see no more questions being asked. Can I do two things? Firstly, check that everyone has heard that exchange and the presentation. Great, thank you. Secondly, I've noticed throughout this hearing, asked if there are anyone from the telephone to ask questions, but as far as I can see, there isn't anyone. Is that still true?
That's perfectly correct, Chairman.
Great, thank you. In which case, it's not a problem. So, fine, thank you. Let's move on then. Can I now ask the ward member, Councillor Steve R. Water?
So, can I just ask when I will be speaking? I think you're giving a different order to the information that I received before in advance of the meeting.
I do apologise. Yes, I think I've missed that. Yeah, sorry. Can I revert back up on the agenda then to the supporters, which is represented by Councillor Simon Pike, and ask you to speak, please. Sorry.
Thank you. I just didn't want to. I want to leave the opportunity for Councillor Ardwater to respond to what I say. So I'm Councillor Simon Pike, the Chairman of the Planning and Highways Committee of Thatcham Town Council. You will have read in the agenda pack for this meeting the reasons why the Council agreed to support the review of the premises licence for Pinchington Hall. You have heard the genuine concerns of local residents about this licence and seeing their supporting evidence in the agenda pack, so I won't repeat them now. This has been confirmed to you by the evidence of the environmental health of nuisance. The subcommittee will need to consider the relevance of this evidence to the review of the premises licence. There are several reasons why it is relevant. Firstly, it is clear from section 100, subsection 1 of the Licensing Act 2003 that activities authorised under a temporary event notice are licensable activities. Therefore, the nuisance of 19th of August occurred while the licensable sale of alcohol was taking place. I'll come back to the 19th of August later with some further information. Secondly, the general duty of the licensing authority that is most relevant to this review is the prevention of public nuisance. The word prevention indicates that action can and probably should be taken in advance of nuisance being caused by activities taking place under the premises licence, if public nuisance is likely to be caused. Thirdly, some of the bookings at Pinchington Hall that have prompted this review are similar in nature to those that would be permitted under its premises licence. The main difference being the arrangements for the supply of alcohol. Finally, it appears to me that some of the responsibilities of a premises licence still apply when the provision of alcohol takes place under a temporary event notice or without requiring any licensing activity. And the provisions that I noted of that Licensing Act are sections 140 and 177A. And the subcommittee may therefore wish to take advice from your lawyer on the relevance of these provisions to the review and the events that prompted it. So I'll just repeat that, sections 140 and 177A of the Licensing Act 2003. Given the evidence of residents and environmental health, this subcommittee is fully justified in revoking the premises licence. If, however, it decides to vary the licence, the recommendations of environmental health may not be sufficient to prevent noise nuisance. It is clear from the events of 19th of August that nuisance can be caused by amplified sound that falls outside of the specific licensable categories defined in the Licensing Act. It may therefore be necessary to add a condition to the premises licence that there shall be no amplified outdoor sound whenever any licensable activity takes place. The council also expressed concern about the provision of car parking. The 38 spaces described in the planning application for change of use, previously discussed, seems insufficient for both staff and up to 120 guests. And it appears also that this car park does not in fact have planning permission. Any significant parking outside of the site will cause nuisance and danger to residents of Wellington Tonia Drive and perhaps even to drivers on Crookham Hill. The Planning and Highways Committee reviewed the decision notice that refused the change of use to a wedding and events venue at its meeting on the 9th of November. It agreed that wording in this notice captured its views excellently on the premises licence, so I'll read it to you now. To be clear, this is the view of Thatcham Town Council for this review, but using the words of West Berkshire Council when it reviews the planning permission for the change of use. And it said, the wedding and events use for this site is not considered to be compatible with the character of the area, given the proximity to the neighbouring properties. The levels of noise emanating from the site and the antisocial hours associated with this are considered to have a severely harmful impact of on the amenity of neighbouring properties. So thank you. I'd like to move on to the statement by the ward member, Councillor John Boyd, who had hoped to be here to be present, but unfortunately has an immovable work commitment. So I'll read that to you now. As ward councillor, I wish to focus my attention on the plight of the local residents resulting from Pinchington Hall being given a licence to sell alcohol. When the subcommittee met to discuss this application originally, we heard from numerous residents and interested parties about the fears they had if such a licence were granted and the effects it would have on those adjoining properties and others in the surrounding vicinity. The applicant gave the subcommittee assurances that their fears were unfounded because of the management conditions they would put in place. The decision of the subcommittee was to grant the licence and took the applicant at their word the property would be properly managed. Even before the licence was granted, the property was being marketed as a wedding/party venue online. Sadly, all of the residents' worst fears came about, with many reported cases that not only supported their fears, but at least one incident that could have turned nasty due to the overconsumption of alcohol by one of the party guests. It is inevitable that a licensed property of this size will attract partygoers for a variety of reasons, and it goes without saying there will be further incidents when alcohol-fueled decisions are made. The property now has a noise abatement order placed on it, and we have already seen assurances made by the licence holder cannot be guaranteed. When awarding a licence, we have to be confident that the conditions placed on the licence holder will be met. But sadly, in this case, the trust has been abused and the residents, along with their own town council members, do not feel they can place their trust in this licence holder again and would therefore support a move for the removal of its licence premises statement. So finally, I'd just like to make a couple of observations on previous discussions. So firstly, the hospital that has been mentioned is Thornford Park Hospital, which is a private psychiatric hospital on the opposite side of Crookham Hill. And I've just made measurements on the West Berkshire online map. And the nearest point of that hospital is 71 metres from the nearest point on the boundary of Pinchington Hall and 140 metres away from the nearest point on the building. And I don't know the details of the hospital, but having been involved in planning applications for it, I would estimate it has probably between 50 and 100 residents. And it is a secure hospital with a high perimeter fence. And secondly, on the 19th of August, I was somewhat confused by the comments made by Ms. Beachy-Smith about the limit to a single portable domestic speaker and that the event was attended all day. Because I'm looking at a photograph on the internet on the website of Chin Chin Mobile Bars, which I take to be the organisation that provided the bar. And it clearly shows Pinchington Hall with the caption, Chin Chin Caravan Bar at Ali and Cassia's wedding at Pinchington Hall in Newbury, August 2021. And the picture clearly shows two public address loudspeakers on stands outside, facing a block of 100 seats. It's not obviously the photograph doesn't show the volume that was used, but in my opinion, as someone who does sound reinforcement, these are professional, semi-professional speakers and not residential, and they would be capable of generating a sound level of 125 dBA, roughly 120 to 125 dBA at 1 meter. That's the way that they're specified. And the direction is they're on the side of the grounds towards the road, facing across the hall and directly in the line of sight of properties in Wellingtonia Drive. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Pike. Can I ask if the applicant or the licence holder wish to address any questions to Councillor Pike? No? I see no other questions. Any questions from the panel? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Pike, and apologies for the unexpected change of agenda.
I think as a chairman myself, I know the property, have my own experiences.
Thank you. In which case I will revert back to the ward member, Councillor Steve Water, and ask him to reintroduce himself and his presentation, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, I am Councillor Steve Water. I'm the ward member for Thatcham South and Crookham on West Berkshire Council, as well as being a member on Thatcham Town Council. So I'd like to make a few points. A lot of material has been very comprehensively set out in front of the committee. First point is, as per my question to Mrs. Beachy-Smith, there was at an initial hearing, the applicant for the licence, Mrs. Beachy-Smith, assured the licensing committee in May of last year that an effective noise management plan would be put in place, thereby preventing noise. This manifestly did not happen. I appreciate, as we all do, of course, that COVID has happened, but that has not stopped the events which we've heard about taking place. And it's been very clear that even if a noise management plan had been possible, it was not effectively carried out. I believe that the nature of a business which partly markets through Airbnb, partly markets on site, can never fully manage noise. Yes, the great majority of hirers are considerate and pleasant people who are in inverted commas normal, but sadly, particularly when you're marketing and aiming for groups who are looking at events, as per the website I alluded to and others have mentioned, when wedding receptions happen or other parties or special events, people consume alcohol and some become unreasonable and loud and unacceptably loud for neighbours. The other issue which both Councillor Pike and Mr. Bryant referred to is Thornford Park Hospital. I'll just add a few words on the nature of the area for those members who do not know this. Thornford Park and Pinchington Hall are at the eastern edge of Greenham Common. It is not part of the area of outstanding natural beauty, but it is a beautiful, quiet, peaceful country area. Thornford Park is there precisely because of that reason. It is on the site of a former American school when Greenham Common was the airbase. It is a secure institution for helping and containing seriously psychiatrically damaged people. There is a risk of escape, of which has happened in the past, and there is a serious risk to residents should that happen. Thornford Park Hospital objected at the original licensing hearing to the fact that noise outside, and as Simon Pike has told us, close to their hospital would be a risk for disturbing patients who are living there. I would reiterate that point. I'm disappointed that Thornford Park have not reattended, even if, and thankfully, there's not been a serious consequence of noise on residents. There is that risk, which is a major concern to me, as well as the the definite lack of amenity and disturbances, which Mr. Bryant and Mr. Thompson have alluded to. Again, this is a peaceful, quiet, pleasant area of our district. While Pinchington Hall itself, again, is a splendidly restored and very elegant house, I do not believe that the type of activity which is being asked from this license is suitable. And so I would strongly support the application of a revoking of this license for the reason we've heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ardile-Water. Are there any questions for the councillor from the panel? Councillor Rolls.
Thank you. Sorry, there's just one thing in my mind that the licensee said was that there wasn't a requirement to produce a noise abatement plan where she's not actually holding an event, a license event herself. But I think so basically, I don't know if it's a question, but I'd like some clarity on it in terms of, I think what we're saying is that the type of activity that's taking place that's not part of that license, there's no noise abatement plan for that, but my understanding is there's no requirement for it. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Okay.
I'll expand on that. The licensing hearing that you attended, you're saying that the panel of the time were convinced by the assurances of the licence holder, but those assurances presumably related to licensable activities, not private hire activities. So would you have expected the licence holder to apply the conditions of a licence to non-licensable activities?
Well, Chairman, obviously I'm not on the licensing committee, and so I was not privy to the discussion after the public part of the meeting. So my uneducated assumption would be that, yes, licensing committee has to consider activities which are licensable, but given that this commitment was given by Mrs. Beachy-Smith in respect of activities, I don't draw a strong line as a ward member between a party which is licensable and a party which is not licensable. Both have the potential to impact other people. I would say in partial mitigation, I do sympathise with Mrs. Beachy-Smith and her company's desire to put this property to good use, and absolutely accept that letting it run derelict would be in no one's interest. But again, I heard the word very clearly that a noise management plan would be in place. I did not expect, and I certainly did not hear the rider that this would only be for licensable activities.
I just have one other question, if I may. So, Councillor Ardile-Water, have you actually received any complaints or feedback from the hospital?
No, I haven't, Councillor Rose, no.
Thank you.
Can I ask if any other questions to be asked the licence holder?
Given the proximity of Thornford Park, which is directly opposite Pinchington Hall, and that they have raised no concerns, doesn't that lead a little bit of a conundrum as to why they wouldn't, if this noise has been so dreadful and so ill managed, which I dispute, that they have not raised a single concern, never contacted me, not a single concern, and I think not to environmental health either. So I am surprised, given, as I say, the proximity is very close, you're quite correct, it's literally directly opposite, a road's width opposite, and it is a secure unit, that we have received no complaints whatsoever. So is that not surprising? If the noise is or the disturbance is as dreadful as being alluded to?
Yes, I personally wouldn't use the word dreadful, and I appreciate other members of this hearing may use that word, but I'm specifically referring to the risk of an event which would be very extreme on a resident, on neighbours, and on patients at the hospital. So yes, it's disappointing they're not here now. It implies that an extreme event has not happened, but it's really other than re-raising the risk, which again I do agree. I'd much rather they were here. I can't assume, and I don't think anyone here should assume, that just because something bad hasn't happened in the last year, it would and could never happen. So I'm thinking about contingencies and what may happen rather than what has actually happened in the last 12 months with COVID.
Thank you. Councillor Pike.
Thank you. Can I ask a question to you, I think it seems material, as to whether Thornton Park was specifically made aware of this review, because obviously Thatcham Town Council was a statutory consultee, but I don't know how widely this review was publicised to other potentially interested parties. Thank you.
I'm not sure that I can answer that in terms of the publicity, but
I think the point is it would be a bit unfair to assume that they're not interested if they had no knowledge of this review hearing.
thank you. I understand the point. Yes. Do we have any information? Okay.
Sorry, Chairman. Can I come in here? It's Julia O'Brien from
Yes, okay.
Hello. Yeah, just to comment that the review application was advertised by various means. There was a notice that was put up on the premises itself, and there was also an advert put up on the offices at Market Street offices in reception there. And I appreciate that people aren't going into the offices very much these days. And also an email was sent out to all the responsible authorities, ward members and parish councils. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, thank you. So it's quite possible that they weren't aware of the hearing. So, okay. Does anyone else have any further questions for the ward member, Councillor Steve Ardar-Walter? I see none. In which case, that concludes, I think, the presentations from interested parties of all sides. I would now like to invite the applicant, Mr. Nigel Bryant, if you wish to address any further comments that have been made at the meeting this morning.
I would only say in conclusion, I mean, there's been a lot of information passed from parties today. So I think everyone would have got a fair understanding of what has been occurring. I don't think there's much more to say. I think you've just got to make up your minds. But at the end of the day, the reality is if you put all that information aside, you've got houses that are right on the boundary of this large residential house. And if you let this license carry on and the Beachy Smiths feel that they now can do as they like and have parties as they like because they've got this bit of paper, this problem won't go away. There will be some very upset residents. I don't know where it will go from here, but if it gets like it got before the noise abatement notice, people will be up in arms. And I don't know, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I invite Mrs. Beachley-Smith, if there's anything you want to say in conclusion?
But only again, obviously we haven't operated licensable events. Should we ever operate them, it will be subject to getting the planning anyway. So I'm not quite sure what the reference with me having this piece of paper will allow me to give free rein to do as I please. It does not. We can only operate within the parameters of Airbnb and private hire, non-licensable until such times as a sensible planning application is accepted for the use as described of this beautiful building. I'm perfectly willing to have a complete discussion with the residents on what might be a good use of the property. It doesn't serve any purpose to stand empty. That in itself could attract vandalism and all sorts of problems for the police. And I think that the whole situation has become slightly outside of legitimate complaints or concerns. And I think it's becomes sort of to the point now that I don't think it much matters what I try and do, whether it's true. I mean, there was a reference to a drunken guest becoming abusive. That guest was abusive because people were filming his child. So you see, the stories are. It's very difficult to defend myself when these things are going on, and once something's been said, it's just been said, isn't it? And I think that the property does need a sensible use, and I think that should be worked out somehow or other, rather than this constant he said, she said that seems to have been going on. And so much of it has been outside of my control because it's not been brought to my attention. It's always retrospective. I don't know if it's true. I don't know how accurate it is. And I certainly couldn't remedy it because I wasn't able to. So that's what I would say.
Thank you very much. Can I just check for a final time that all participants have heard the recent exchanges? Thank you. Sorry, I see, Jodie, you have your hand raised. Would you like to ask one more question? No. Okay, fine. Thank you, everyone. Please, thank you for all your contributions. Just remind you now that members will meet in a separate place to consider everything that we've heard this morning. Thank you. We've received an enormous amount of information, all of which is relevant to us. We will take those submissions that have been laid out before us. A written decision notice will be issued to interested parties, setting out the verdict as soon as possible, but at the latest within 5 working days of the hearing. So thank you again.